past, present and emerging, for they hold the memories, the traditions and the culture of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across the nation. We extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. Welcome to the 2022 How to Graduate Nursing and Midwifery event. Thank you for taking the time out of your precious Saturday to join us today. For housekeeping, toilets out to the registration desk, emergency exits to your left and at the front gate, and feel free to enjoy the snacks and lunch will be served at midday. If you haven't done so, please make sure to register and become a member of SHP. We value every input each one of you bring to our SHP community. Somali Healthcare Professional is a non-for-profit organisation based in Melbourne with crosses to international waters. Founded in 2019, we aim to connect current and future Somali healthcare professionals whilst also providing evidence-based public health information to our wider community. Somali Healthcare Professional was founded by Fatima Ilmi, a fourth-year midwifery and nursing student, Najma Saeed, a registered emergency paediatric nurse, and I, a registered midwife. So for our current projects that we're running, we've got firstly the picture project. This is a project that we mainly run through Instagram and Facebook, and it's an opportunity for people to tell us about their professional journeys and a picture. So I encourage every single one of you to think about doing this today and sending us your story on our Instagram so we can share it to everyone. We'll also have our live project, which is similar to the picture project, but just in a live form, where people talk about their professional journeys, their challenges, their motivations, and everything else in between. So far, we've worked with multiple organisations, most renowned the Huddle in North Melbourne, the Migration Council of Australia, and DHS. For those organisations, we've mainly covered topics concerning COVID, consent and vaccinations, and we've done these through many forms, including via Zoom, and most recently with our children between the ages of 5 to 11 last year, and also I think a few months ago. So I'm going to pass this on to Najmo, one of our co-founders, and we'll do our first icebreaker.
What jobs you've done in the past. All right, this can be paid work, it can be volunteering, it can be work experience. Don't think that, oh, it's just the job that I did. Volunteering is very important. At the end of the day, whether you got paid or not, the experiences that you've gained, the skills that you've gained from your experience, like the volunteering and whatnot, is very important. It can be related to the job that you're applying to. Those skills can be transferable. A lot of people think, oh, no, I was just volunteering, I'm not going to put in the work experience part, but it's very important that you do. So yeah, what should you include in this part? Include the name of the business that you work for, your job title, right? So you could say Royal Melbourne Hospital nurse or registered nurse, and the geographical place that you worked at. So you can be like Melbourne or wherever the location that you are at, right? And it's very important to also note the dates that you worked at. So let's say March 2020 until November 2022, right? So these are all important information that you should put down. And then after that, you kind of go through what you did basically, what your role was and what you did, right? What your duties were. And you include relevant roles. Do not list every job you've done, right? So if you're applying for a nursing job, right, you're not going to put that you are a security guard or you have security experience. You're not going to put something that's totally irrelevant, irrelevant, nothing to do with the job you're applying for, right? So put jobs and experiences that are going to be related to the role that you're applying for, or even jobs and experience that skills that you got from that can be transferred to the role that you're applying for, right? So you may have lots of experience, but only put the most relevant ones. And the order that you put them should be most recent to least recent, right? So that you start off with the last job that you had, and then you kind of go down to the older ones. All right, so when it comes to the paragraphs that you put in, begin your bullet points with descriptive resume action verbs. So examples of these are below. So you talk in past tense, right? And the way you start it, you can be like, organized, it works safe. a work safety initiative that saved the company money on workers' competition. So these are action verbs to describe what you did, right? Organized, developed, optimized. So these are the type of ways you want to start your dot points and your sentences. Looking at the example below, customer service representative. That's the role, they mentioned the role. Computer company LLC, that's the name of the company, right? And then location, Scottsdale, AZ. And then under that, the dates. They started on March 2016 and they're still working there presently. And then description of their roles and what they did: supervise customer service training programs that grew customer engagement by 35%. So this goes back to the statistics I mentioned before. If you have statistics, always good to mention them. Yeah? Moving on, implemented new office layout that enhanced communication between staff. So look at the way the sentences are starting. Supervised, implemented. So these are all action verbs, right? And then moving on, one employer of the year twice. So if you have any accomplishments in your job, anything, any awards that you've won, good to mention. Moving on, earned highest performance ratings across 7 consecutive months of resolving customer problems. Developed more efficient filing systems for customer needs. So basically what we get from this, the way you start your dot points, your sentences, and if you have any accomplishments, awards, put it in there, any statistics, put it in there. Education, training, qualification, right? So you can pull your bachelor's degree, you can pull certificates, you can pull any qualification you have, your first aid training, working with children's children. This all goes in the same section, right? So you can start off obviously your qualifications, like your studying degree, and then you can kind of have another section under it. So if you guys can see the example, the licenses and certificates part, you can kind of mention you're working with children, first aid and whatnot. That can all kind of go in one section, kind of split up into 2. Now, sorry, you have a question? Yep. Yep. No, so you put the most recent one, you're a manager, and then under that you can put the same thing and then put your previous role, right? So it kind of shows that. From there you went to that, and that's your most recent, right? We'll have a questions and answers at the end, but yeah, if you want to have a question, if you have a question in the middle while I'm talking, that's fine, you can completely ask me as well. So, references. Now this is an interesting part, because the way we used to do it is completely different to how it's done now. Do I need to include a reference or references? Short answer is a no. References on resumes are no longer the norm, right? Now why is that? References on resumes are usually sensitive information and should not be widely distributed due to privacy concerns. So when you upload your resume on, let's say, Seek, LinkedIn, Indeed, or wherever platforms, you might not be aware that these platforms can actually be accessed by anyone. Right? Anyone can make an employer account and actually look at anyone and everyone's resumes. So if you're putting details of your references there, you're exposing people's, private information for literally millions and millions of people to see. So nowadays, due to identity theft and all these issues, references are actually a no-no. Or about it is, what people do is instead of putting the names and numbers and stuff, you can just put references provided upon request. Right? And then once they ask you, you can just kind of email them. But you've noted that on your resume and they can see that. Right? Yeah, any other questions? I hope you guys took some tips and tricks from what I went through. If you do have any other questions, I'll be around and maybe I'll come over to the tables and kind of go through in more detail if you guys want. But yeah, moving on, I'll get Aasma to come up and she'll go through the cover letter section with you guys.
Cover letters and resumes go hand in hand. You can't have a resume without having a cover letter. So applying for a job, I know that we're always kind of going on, so you need a resume, and I feel like cover letters don't really have as much attention. But as I said, yeah, they go hand in hand. So what we have up here is an example of a cover letter. I don't think you guys can see that. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. So on the top left-hand corner, you should have kind of similar to your resume, where you want to have your name highlighted as the biggest font, and then you'll follow it up with your address. So I always kind of recommend just putting your suburb. If the place that you're applying for is nearby, put your suburb. If you're kind of applying in a single, like maybe an hour, I would scrap the suburb, because they're going to be like, oh, you know, it might be a bit far, I don't know, should you commit? And then follow it up with your phone number, resume, and yeah, if you have a LinkedIn, attach a LinkedIn. So with cover letters, it's always important to address the hiring person that, so if you go on the website, there's usually contact X, Y, and Z. I would always address the cover letter to them. If there isn't a name there, I would say to whom it may concern. Does that make sense? Cool, okay. So starting off, as you guys can see here, so you'd have the details of the job. So you go in with your name and then the recruitment. So let's say you're applying as a nurse. So you can just be like nurse, pediatric or whatever. The organization name. So if you guys are applying for a hospital, it'll be Royal Women's, put that as the third line. Step 2, introduction. Very, 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 very important. I would say your introduction is almost a snapshot of your resume, but a fun fact is, I think as Abdul mentioned, people only tend to look at resumes for the first 10 seconds if you don't grab their attention. So a cover letter is an amazing way to back yourself up. So in your cover letter, you have your, the front, your first paragraph as your introduction. So what you would do is your name, and then you'd be like, please accept, the first line very important, please accept my application as a nurse within the Royal Women's Hospital as advertised on your website. If it's on Indeed, you can say as advertised through Indeed. Cool? You're then going to go into kind of an explanation a little bit by yourself. It's kind of a snapshot of your resume, but you kind of want to make it slightly a bit more personal. So what we have written here is, I'm an experienced professional, so nurse, currently working, maybe, say if you're working as a customer service role, maybe you can change that sentence and be like, currently in my final year of, my final grad year or whatever, I have X amount experience within this sector, right? So if you were raised here, whatever, you can just be like, or if you had just migrated, you could be like, since arriving in Australia, put the year, you have gained a number of experiences within the months that you've been here, and then in the sector. Is this making sense? Okay, cool. So you have completed a bachelor or a diploma, whatever it is that you're studying, within this field, name the university, name the year that you completed it in, specializing in what is your major. This point, I would provide a little sentence at the end. So I would be like, an example is, what I'm now looking for is an opportunity to apply my strength gained over the past 5 years of, the context of the Australian accounting system, this is an example, to reconnect with my career in various accounting roles. So if you guys are all entering the workforce, so what I would say is, over my past 4 years of my university degree, I have learned this, and now I'm trying to take those skills into the workforce. So all the skills that you've developed, you now want to implement them. That's what you want to highlight. Any questions? Cool, moving on to the next section. Step 3, the body. So, you want to discuss the purpose and why you are applying for this role. Something that I kind of want you guys to take today is something we call the STAR method, and it is incredibly important in the way you structure your cover letters. It also helps you out with your interviews. I'm not sure if you guys have key selection criteria. I think it's pretty much everywhere now, applying for a job with key selection criteria. The way you answer those questions is always within a STAR technique. So what is the STAR technique? It's a situation. So I wrote some notes. So an example of a situation is, once you've thought of an appropriate situation for that question is you want to take the time to briefly make enough background of the story and make sure to include who was resolved, what was the nature of the conflict, what took place, and how it was, that is the situation. So you want to talk about situation. You're going to move on to task, which is the T. So you're going to explain the task and who was assigned for the role. You guys are all nurses. You're going to talk about yourself. A lot of a mistake that a lot of people make is they kind of always say we, and I know that in nursing, I'm pretty sure you guys work together in groups. Yeah. So obviously you want to highlight that, but right now you're trying to sell yourself. So you're going to talk about who was the task, yourself, what was the expected role, what was the outcome of it, and what was the expected result. And then for action, you're going to describe the action that took place, and what it was that executed the solution. So how did you develop the right course of action? If the action was carried out by a team, if the action was carried out by yourself, and describe the role and your personal attributes to it. Include the steps that you took in your decision of making the process of the answer. Okay? And now we're going to talk about the results. So the results of your actions, what was the ultimate outcome? Did the actual outcome mirror the expected outcome of you? And describe what happened and why, and how your decisions contributed to the overall result. So that is a STAR method, and I'll go back to the cover letter. So when discussing your cover letter, when you're writing it out, kind of always try to keep the STAR method in mind. So this is section 3, which is the body. So it's to prove that you are the ideal candidate for the role and that you understand the work. So you want to take whatever the position description is and you want to implement that into your cover letter. You want to take the keywords that they use. You want to, if they kind of resolve conflict, you kind of want to briefly touch on that in your your cover letter and just be like, this situation came up, resolved it, and move on from there. Show the fit between the roles and the selection criteria and your experience and the skills and your accomplishments. So now you want to so back to the STAR method. So create a body of your cover letter. It should be approximately about 1 paragraph using the STAR method, although you may be able to merge it into one response. If there's no key selection criteria specified for the role or accompanying documents, you should create your own based on what you know about the position, the company, and what their needs are. So, cover letter, that's kind of I would say you need about 3 paragraphs, 2 of them being the body. So the first paragraph, the introduction, I would keep that short and sweet, only maybe 2 or 3 sentences, nothing more. The body is what you need to really sell yourself, so I would say 2 paragraphs max, and then a conclusion. With a cover letter, you really need to use, punctual wording, words that they kind of use in their job description, if that makes sense. And then, so that's step 3, which is the body, and now we're moving on to the conclusion. So for the conclusion, the purpose is to end on a positive note. So you're mentioning the document that you have attached, you have a resume, and you have a key selection criteria. You want to say, please accept this cover letter along with the addition of my resume and my key selection criteria, how and when that you can be contacted, and you welcome the opportunity to provide any further information for an interview. So, written update, say, I am keen to apply for this role and the strengths that apply for the position and the company. You believe that your knowledge and your skills and your experience will be an asset for the role. My resume outlining my various skills and experience together with the names, telephone numbers of the references. As I mentioned, we don't really do references on resumes. I kind of always leave that as provided upon request. So I would just say, with my experience, I would be pleased to attend an interview to discuss my application and be contacted at the above address or telephone number so you can arrange a time. Yours sincerely. Always end it on a yours sincerely. Make sense? Any questions? Yes? also mainly, I guess, I would add in kind of what you did. So the skills that you developed there, and like the action that you did, I would add that into the cover letter. But the feedback, I guess you can slightly, but I would maybe kind of put that also in my resume. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess, let's say your references of people that are working in feedback.
Yeah.
And we also have to get some references from something.
Yeah.
Is it advisable to put that as one name and say, manager Sophie was commenting why a women's interpretation is very well done.
I would
just say,
I would-
student name and support feedback.
Yeah, and if they're your reference, I think you said right on top of the first, and then once they do, they kind of like, oh, hey, your references, you can let them know that Sophie, you just be like, this is my manager at this placement, I leave the answer phone call, and you can kind of just let them know slightly like, I had a great experience with them, just kind of brief them on that, and then hopefully they do the rest. Yeah. Any questions?
Is there like a word limit that you recommend, or?
Yes, great point. 1 page max. Do not go over a page. Your cover letter is, as sometimes as employees don't even have a chance to look at resumes. So if you tick all the list of, you've got a resume, you've got a key section criteria, and you've got a cover letter, they're going to read that cover letter. So you want your cover letter to be a snapshot of your resume, but you want it to really highlight you. So, as I said, that introduction where you introduce yourself, you want to talk about you as a person, your experience, and why you think your skills. So basically, you want to take your skills and like, I want to take the skills that I have developed, and I now want to further them in your organization. So that first introduction, very important. Your second paragraph, you can kind of have two in the middle. I don't mind two max for your bodies. That's when you want to discuss your experience. As I'm pretty sure all of you guys are kind of in uni, so you might not have necessarily the experience, but you have an educational experience. So you can just have one body paragraph that you can just make it stick, yeah? And then your conclusion, 2 to 3 sentences. You kind of want to end on a good note, a positive manner, just be like, I really hope that what I can give you this, and please take my application. End it on a. Any other questions?
So, we go back to what you said about selection criteria.
Yeah.
It's like really long, and obviously I don't see all that, but do you just pick the 3 things that you can just focus on that have experience in this one?
For your key section criteria, or your
Like, for instance, if hospital says something like, I don't know, but a list of 10 things and
Yep.
also hospital values, and you want to add those in combination to your cover letter.
Yeah.
It's like 6 or 8, like values, but obviously it's going to make it really long, multiple pages. You just pick 2 or 3 that you focus on, and that's it.
Yeah, I would pick 2 or 3 that maybe I guess I was going to pick the top one that put this because they're on the top for a reason. And also you want to make sure that it actually aligns with you. Because end of the day, you don't want to lie because it's going to come back and they're going to be like, you said you're a team player, and you're going to come back and be like, I hate you. They're going to be like, but you took the values of our website, you said this. So I would say definitely take the top 3 or take the ones that align with you the most. Yeah, back to key section criteria, sorry. Key section criteria needs to be a whole different document. People say add it onto your cover letter. I don't like doing it because it kind of drags it out and it kind of becomes a blurred line where you're like, what's the cover letter, what's the key section criteria? Key section criteria always leave it as a separate document. And key section criteria is a list of questions that the company will list out. You need to answer each question. And you can't, I know some people are like, oh, this question, I don't relate to it, I don't really know what they're asking of me. I don't have the skills that they're requiring. That's when you can say, I went to uni and I did this. I may not have the skills that you need, but I am more than willing to learn. That's when you need to discuss this. But key section criteria always be the second document. Always use the STAR method on your key section criteria. I think the STAR method comes in as the most important in your key section criteria. So which is situation, task, action, result. Situation, maybe you have a manager told you to do something, you're like, I don't really feel comfortable doing that. Task, let's say they're asking you to responses the best, and you don't necessarily go over a word limit. There's no word limit on the selection criteria, but there is a word limit. No one says it. So maximum 2 pages. I'd say 1.5, to be honest with you. And yeah, address all the questions. Remember, I is the most important thing. Something that I notice a lot of people, like I said, is we always think about others, and we always talk about working in a team, but you gotta put yourself first. So always, it's I, unless it's a team-based question, or how you work with people. Yeah. Cool. That makes sense. Any questions? No? Amazing. We're gonna be around, and we're gonna come past, and we're gonna talk to everyone. So yeah, feel free to just put something. Thank you.
Lovely Lucinda and Laura. These amazing women, I have the opportunity to work with them side by side every single day. They are wonderful at their jobs. Lucinda's a midwife. She's also doing her Masters in Midwifery at the moment. Laura's a nurse and midwife, and they both are clinical support nurses midwives. So I'll stop talking about how great they are, and you'll see it for yourselves. If you have any questions, just chuck it. It's going to be super chill, very informal, so just a friendly chit chat about interviews. If you could welcome them with a warm round of applause, that'd be great.
Thanks, Ummi. We're super excited to be here to talk to you guys today. Like Ummi said, super informal, so please, if you have any questions, you want us to go into more detail, just rack your hand up or yell out. We thought we'd try to kind of keep it pretty simple and be a little bit led by what you want. First of all, just wanted to find out, have any of you actually interviewed any sort of job before? Yeah, a couple of you? Yeah. And for some, a lot of you, we realise this is probably one of the first proper interviews that you're ever going to have, which is pretty scary. So completely understand how you might be feeling, a little bit anxious and nervous, and just wanted to reiterate that's completely normal. When you care about something a lot, of course it's normal to be nervous because you want to do well, okay? I want to really make sure you know that we know when we're watching your interviews, we know you're going to be nervous, so we're going to cut you some slack for those nerves, okay? So just really focus on trying to sell yourself who you are and all the amazing qualities that you possess, so we can really get a good grasp on that. It's okay if you fumble and do all those sort of things. We'll see through that if you can tell us, how great you are. All right? Awesome. Let's go. So what's the aim of doing interviews? So, really all we want to know is how amazing you are, okay? So don't sell yourself short. Don't talk yourself down. Really talk yourselves up. So we want to make sure that you're the right fit for our hospital, whatever hospital you're applying for. So hopefully you've had a bit of a chance to have a look at some of the hospitals. Yeah. I hope you do, because you only got next week? Yeah. Awesome. Have you started writing resumes? Yeah. Awesome. Great. So you're probably not even thinking about the interview yet? Just get one bit at a time. This might hopefully help also writing your CV letters and stuff, because a lot of this will relate to writing CV letters. Yeah? Anything to add? Okay, great. So main thing is focus on your strengths and your skills, okay? So we all come from, many walks of life. Some of us maybe have had different career paths before. Some of you might be, straight out of school into jobs. That's okay. You will all bring a unique set of skills, okay? So you need to tell us that, because we don't know you at all. And even if we do, assume that we don't. So don't leave any details out. Tell us everything that you, if you've been a RUSOM or a RUSOM in one of the other hospitals, really draw on that experience. Make that well known. Keep reiterating that, okay? If you speak multiple languages, tell us that, because that's awesome. What a great skill set to have. If you've got a really, you've done a master's of something else in healthcare, like health science, tell us that, because that's just going to bring even more knowledge to, the healthcare system and the way it is at the moment. And we want to make sure, we want to see your passion, okay? There's the best thing about doing interviews and reading your CVs. It makes me so excited, it makes me really like warm and fuzzy when I get to read how excited you all are to join our profession, because it is a really great profession. Yeah.
So I'm just going to go through some key tips for your interviews. So most of your interviews are probably going to be online, but it's still really important. The same thing still applies. So make sure you're dressed professionally and that your environment that you're going to be doing your interview in is quiet. So that might be a little bit tricky if you're at home and there's noise and things like that, but try and have a quiet space, because then that will also help you when you're reading the questions and answering your questions, that you're in an environment that's not distracting you. So your phone should be away for that time that you're doing your interviews. This is easier said than done, and I speak really fast, so I'm trying to do that. So when you read your questions, make sure that when you're responding, you respond slowly and you're clear about what you're answering. I say a lot, that's another thing. Just be mindful of the language that you use and little things like that. The way we speak on a day-to-day basis, I keep doing it now. Yeah, so just try and record yourself practicing some questions and look back and just see what things you do. Like, I tend to talk with my hands or say a lot. Just try and minimize those things. Now I keep doing it. Questions can always be, so reread the questions. Some questions might have two parts to them. So read the question. I think you have a set amount of time, maybe 60 seconds or so. Try and read the question slowly. 60 seconds is actually a good amount of time, but when you're panicking, it might seem like it's only been 10 seconds and they'll start recording your answer. So try and take your time. So other things that we recommend is grounding things. So during interviews, it can be really hard to not be nervous, obviously. Have a drink of water beside you. So when you read the question, a really good tip is take a drink of your water. This helps to kind of just ground, to slow you down, and your brain is already thinking. It's like in school when you get asked a maths question and you repeat the question. It's not that you haven't heard it, you're repeating it to give yourself time. Your brain is already then working so that you formulate an answer before you start speaking. So that's a really good tip, to kind of just take that moment, and how you do that is take a drink, and then that kind of grounds you, and then you can go in to answer your question.
And that's a really important point too. Don't just rush into the answer. Like, you've got time to take a breath and then do the answer the way you want to do it. You want to feel good after you've answered it. You don't want to feel like you've just rushed in there to get everything out. The answer doesn't have to be necessarily a really long-winded answer. It can be quite a short and concise answer, and that can be a better answer than trying to tell us everything. Does that make sense?
And try and give examples. So what they look for in interviews is that the questions that you're answering, you've actually experienced it and you know what the question is asking you. So try and have examples of things. It doesn't have to be anything complex. It's very simple things like teamwork, an example of how you were an active member of a team and how you helped in a team setting, for example, or if it could be a conflict question, just give examples to specific to that question. So it doesn't have to be anything. It could be as simple as, oh, I assisted someone to walk from here to there in nursing, let's say, or I helped a woman breastfeed. But what you're trying to capture is your skills and how you apply it in your clinical setting. So try and remember that. Use lots of examples. Then it shows that you actually understand what the question is asking you to elaborate on.
Yeah, and like Lucinda said, I think one of the most valuable things you can do is either watch yourself when you're practicing your answers, either in the mirror or record yourself on your laptop and listen to yourself back. Because Lucinda and I are both terrible at saying and we don't even realise it. There'll be things that you do as well, and I think that will give you confidence to be also say, oh, I actually sounded all right. That was pretty good. I really liked the way that I sounded. And it helps to kind of, we all know what we want to say in our head, but then when you go to say it, sometimes it doesn't quite come out the way we want. So it just gives you time to then go and reflect and go, okay, well, how can I then express myself better and say what I really want to say? Does that make sense?
So a lot of you will be applying to multiple hospitals, so it's really, really important that you make your answers organizational specific. So know the values of the hospital that you're applying to, so that you don't get caught up with answering questions. Like if you're doing different interviews similar times, you're answering values of a different hospital. So just be really, really mindful of where you're applying and what their values are, and then you can apply that into your answer. And it's also really good to know for each of the hospitals that you're applying to, know what the future. So in our hospital specifically, it's our strategic direction is what we call it. So just know what they're aiming to improve on or aiming to organise in the future. So that kind of shows that you've looked into the hospital, you know what their strategic goals are for the future and what they're aiming to do to improve the hospital.
So like our hospital is focusing on certain population groups, so there's violence against women, and that's really a big strong part of our hospital's kind of way forward. So if you mentioning those sort of things will make you look amazing when we're interviewing. So it says, you've done your research, you know the hospital, and your passions and long-term goals kind of align with the hospital's long-term goals. They're the sort of things that we want to hear from you, not just your generic answer of, I'm passionate to be a midwife because I want to help people. Yes, of course you do. That's why you're a midwife, that's why you're a nurse. We all want to help people, but go that next step further and tell us that actually long-term, I see myself working for your hospital. Yeah, they're the sort of things that will make you stand out, because we don't really want to hire someone for 1 year and work really hard to make them a really amazing nurse midwife and then they leave. We want to keep you forever and ever and nourish you, help you grow, help you build to be the best healthcare professional that you can be. That's what we want. So we kind of are looking for people who also want to be supported like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So yeah, that ties into, in terms of when you're doing your interview, make sure you include, if it's relevant to the question, what you've seen in the hospital and what your career goal is and how you see yourself in the future in that hospital. So for example, in our hospital we have a lot of specialist clinics. So if you have a special interest, obviously you're at the beginning of your career, you don't know if that's really what you want to do. So if you have a special interest, for example, teenage pregnancy. So we have a young women's clinic, for example, in our hospital. So you can say, in the future, once I've gotten X, Y, Z, I would like to be part of that clinic and see how can I achieve that? Is that something that's achievable in your hospital? Then how are you going to assist me to get there? So that's things to know, anything that's specific to what you might be interested in.
We just thought we'd do a little activity. So turning to the person next to you, I'd like you to tell them what you think your 3 strengths are, your 3 greatest strengths, okay? And then once you've done that, we'll come back and we'll talk to each other about how that felt. Right, go, you've got 2 minutes. You should be practicing now and talking to each other about your strengths, because it's a really hard thing to do. For whatever reason, we really struggle to tell our friends and family, let alone strangers, how great we are. And we are great. We're amazing. We're women. So I don't know why our society makes it so hard for us. So I want you to start practicing and saying how great you are and all your amazing skills, because when you say it with confidence, like that comes across to us as in, you're selling yourself to me, that you do sound amazing, I do want to hire you. So start practicing that, and with that I want your other bit of homework to be, I want you to look at what your strengths are and how you can kind of line that up with the hospital's values. So, for example, I just go back to women, sorry, because that's what I know, but our values are passion, courage, discovery, and respect. So I think, one of my strengths is passion. So how do I then line it up to be like the women's values? Or, I really like to communicate, but I try to do that respectfully. So how do I kind of link that into the respectful? Or, I like to learn. Great, I'll link that into discovery, So they might not necessarily ask you a question, what are your strengths? But in every question, they're basically asking, what are your strengths? So you need to kind of, in every question, put in a strength where you can. Even if it doesn't quite fit, just chuck it in there somewhere. Put it into the example. Line it into anything you can, because that's essentially what we're asking you in every question, okay? We're not asking it that directly. Yeah? That was all for that. Okay. Again, they don't always ask you, questions about growth areas, but I think it's a good idea to have an answer in your head in case they do, because we want to turn this question into a negative into a positive, essentially. So think about it, an answer that you could say, yeah, as a student, one of the areas that I was told that I needed to improve on was my confidence, right? Confidence in talking to patients. That was the feedback that I got, and I took that feedback on board, and I practiced speaking to patients. And then by the end of the placement, the feedback actually came back to me that that was now one of my strengths. And because I was able to go away and reflect on that and work really hard on that and practice that, I then turned this weakness into a strength. That's going to look great. If you say something along those lines of how you've taken the feedback, you've taken it well, you've gone home, you've reflected on it, because reflective practice is important, and how you've then been able to turn that and practice, work hard to turn that into something that now you're really good at, that will make potentially a question where you might, write yourself off into a really positive question. So whatever, it is, doesn't have to be confidence, but that's a good example. Try and have a little scenario in your head. Yeah, back to using examples. I might let you explain. You kind of touched on this before. Using examples. I think
a lot of the organizations will most likely ask you a question about a conflict, because inevitably when you're working in a team, conflict will arise because it's different people working together. So to keep that teamwork an element of a team, you need to be able to resolve conflict and know how to respond when you're in a confrontational situation, for example. And it doesn't have to be something where it's severe. It could be something very small where there's just different perspectives or different opinions on something, and how do you approach that in a respectful way. So, for example, let's say for me, if care is recommended for a woman and her baby and she doesn't want it, and another team member is recommending it, and then the woman saying this, the other healthcare professional saying this, and you might agree with the woman. So how do you kind of navigate when there's differing in opinions, and to do it in a respectful way and to find a compromise, if you can find a compromise, or to respectfully say we'll agree to disagree, but showing that if you've been in a situation where it's not going to be comfortable, but how do you navigate that being uncomfortable? And the best way to address it is to speak to the person in question before you involve anyone else. So keep it contained. So that's another thing as well. If it's appropriate to approach it in a way, sometimes it's stepping away and coming back to it is how you can say you've tackled it. I've gone back, thought about it, reflected on it, and then came back and said, look, in that situation, X, Y, Z was, I might have not acted appropriately, or I felt like this could have been done better, etc. So it doesn't always have to be necessarily overly negative. It's just to show that you will encounter conflict, and when you did, how did you cope with it, and how did you address it in a way that keeps the team intact and you're respectful towards the other members of the team.
And so, another example that I think they asked me this in my grad year was, you are sitting in a tea room and you overhear someone saying something inappropriate about another team member. So you've got two parts of this question. You could either use this example as a teamwork question, how you built teamwork, or how you dealt with conflict. The conflict is that you don't like what they're saying and you think it's inappropriate, that what they're saying, whatever they're saying in the tea room about another colleague is inappropriate. What do you do? So, the response might be, well, you've got a couple of ways to respond to this. It kind of depends on the person. I guess it depends on the situation. If you feel safe enough without embarrassing them in front of everyone else, you would probably wait till you have them alone and say, look, what you were saying about me before, I really didn't like that, and I don't think she would appreciate that you were talking about her behind her back in that sort of setting. I think if you've got an issue, you need to go and talk to Ummi about it, or whatnot. Yes, that might be one way you deal with it. The other way might be, if it was really inappropriate, okay, and you don't feel comfortable, it might be, okay, I need to go and get some extra support about how I'm going to then come back and deal with this issue. So it might be going to a CSM, it might be going to the unit manager and saying, hey, this is the conversation that I've heard, I really didn't like it, I'd love some support and advice about how I then go and have this really difficult conversation with this colleague about how I didn't like what they were saying about me in the tea room. Yeah? So it's just showing how you would then escalate appropriately and manage that conversation in a really diplomatic way. You don't have to fix it, it's just showing that you know not to kind of call it out in front of everyone and make that person then feel really silly either, in a really safe space, giving them a chance to kind of identify that they've maybe made a mistake. Is that a good example? Does that help? Yeah?
So I was going to say, and then it goes back to your values. I'd say for the women, one of the values is respect. So you can try and stick to, I suppose, not to say factual, but obviously you can have emotive responses to conversations, but bring it back then to say, you know, we need to be respectful to each other, bring it back to that, so it doesn't necessarily have to feel like it's that confrontational, if that makes sense. If you're addressing someone about something that's maybe not respectful or inappropriate.
And you can say, I draw on my excellent communication skills that I have, and I would use them, and I would listen to the person, because, you know, we know listening might help uncover, you know, whatever else is going on. So you're kind of telling them your strengths, you're telling them the values, but you're also telling them how you would handle a conflict situation. And then you might also have another example, you might say use the same example to then show you, to kind of explain to the questioner how you work well in a team. I work well in a team because we have to openly communicate with each other, we have to respect each other, and this same example that I've remembered, I'm then able to mould to a different question, yeah? So that you don't have to remember 10 different examples, you might just pick 3 that you're able to kind of, depending on the question, at short notice, then mould that little scenario to fit whatever they're asking of you. So sometimes that means having a few little fibs in there of things that maybe didn't happen, but it doesn't matter, that's not the point. The point is that you are able to talk through what you would do if that situation arised, and that would just give us more in-depth insight into the way that you think and the way that you practice. Does that make sense? That's why we want examples, because you know, anyone can say that they're passionate, but how are you passionate? How do you show that? How do you show that with, you know, one-on-one care, teaching a woman how to breastfeed, or, you know, helping someone when they're being palliated, or being made palliative, or whatever. So, yeah, kind of just go that step deeper, okay? And sometimes you might half answer the question and then go, oh, actually, I've got more to say. Don't think because you've taken a break that you can't jump back into it, okay? And then linking that last bit of the example or whatever you're talking about back to the question, right at the end to tie it all back together and say, yep. So that's how I would, that's how I practice teamwork. I think we're talking about it.
So when you're closing off the interview, I think they'll, if you have any questions to ask the organisation, it's always good to ask, because you're going to be a new graduate midwife and nurse midwife, about what programs they have to support new midwives, and professional development days that are offered through other graduate programs. So it just kind of shows that you are keen to strengthen your already existing skills and learning new skills and consolidating them. And for example, in our hospital, we have our transition to speciality practice, which is offered to you when you're about 3 years out, so grad plus 3. So it then shows that you're hoping to stay there for that long and to progress in the profession.
And it also shows that you've done your research and you know what the hospital then offers. So asking questions that then are also showing off that you've done your research and you know what that hospital offers looks great.
So I've already touched on.
Anything else? We'll be hanging around, so if there's anything you don't feel confident asking in front of everyone else, please just come and tap us on the shoulder and ask us. Very, very happy to answer questions. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Discussion panel, as you guys see, we've got our beautiful panelists, and this is an interesting, the reason why we wanted to discuss a discussion panel was so that you guys can also ask questions, but also to find out, we've got people who've been matched starting their grad year, people that have been matched, and just the matching process overall. So let's just start off. Can I just go around the circle? Can I just get your name, profession, years of experience, and why you chose your particular profession, whether it's nursing or midwifery?
Alright, I'm first. Hi everyone, I'm Cathy. So I'm about to start my grad year as a nurse in about a few weeks at Eastern Health. I studied at ACU, I did the Bachelor of Nursing and Business. Before that I was actually doing mid with Ummi until I transferred over because mid got too much for me. And so I chose nursing, and then I just decided to add on business because why not? It was easy in BCE, so I want to back up, so I added business with it. So yeah. What else did you?
We're just going around.
Hi, I'm well. I'm a nurse and a midwife. I'm about to start my grad in 2 weeks' time. So I'll be doing it at Western Health, John Hannah. So if you come there next year, I'll see you then, ladies. I study at uni, and I think the reason why I chose to do nursing and midwifery was basically due to my background when I was a little bit younger. I guess coming from my background, there was less healthcare, and there's still less access to safe healthcare. So basically, that what made me choose to do nursing and midwifery, and maybe one day go back home and provide service. Yeah.
Love that. That's really cool. Can we get a round of applause?
Hi everyone, my name is Ummi. I'm a registered midwife. I've been working for about 3 years now. I did my bachelor's at ACU. Internal anxiety, I know. I did my graduate year at the Mercy. I work at the Women's now. I also do maternity research at the Mercy, something on the side. I'm going to start my master's in August. Going back to uni on purpose. Not a good idea.
Since you're speaking, we'll start off with you with the first question, then we can kind of go around as well. How did you find the graduate process, the application process of it all? Because we've got soon to be graduates who are in the process of actually applying. So how did you find the whole process of it?
I was so stressed. I think I lost weight. I was super anxious. I think I had a lot of self-doubt. I just didn't think I'll be employed, to be honest. I was like, great, calls here I come. I was just really anxious. I didn't think I was good enough because the people that I was studying were really, really amazing midwives, and I just didn't think I was at the same level as they were. So when I was doing my grad applicants, I was actually on placement at the same time, so I think it just added to my anxiety and stress. I remember writing my resume cover the night before it was due. It was all really rushed. And I applied for Mercy, Sunshine, Northern, and Epworth Freemasons in Richmond. I put Mercy as my first preference because that's where I did most of the placements at. I did the first 2 Mercy, about 10 minutes drive from my home. I loved the people there that I've gone to placement at, so I felt like Mercy was my home, and I applied, and alhamdulillah, I got in. And I think that year they had about 300 applicants, and they chose 30 of us for Mercy Hellenberg and Mercy Werribee. So it was just, that was me back in 2019 or something, yeah.
And if you were to go back, all the way back, like that little mini Ummi, if you could go back, what would you do differently in that?
I think the thing I would do different is look at the program a little bit more. I think I wish I did that. At the time, I was just really focused on comfortability, distance, location. I didn't really think about the actual graduate program and what we were going to offer, in that program. I think if I looked at that a little bit more, I probably would have gone to a different hospital. I loved working in the Mercy. I would do it 100% again and again and again. I love the people there. I learned a lot. But by the end of it, what I wanted to be, the kind that I wanted to be, it didn't feel like I could do that there. So I was able to do clinic. When I finished my graduate year, there was quite a bit of, difficulty doing things like domiciliary my skills where I wanted to do a little bit more. And then that's why I moved out to this hospital. And I think it just goes to show where you start is not always where you end up staying. You might end up going somewhere else. But if I could go back, I probably would have gone to this hospital just based on program. But yeah, I loved my graduate program. I had some really wonderful people that I worked with, really good friends still with them because we just really bonded. And yeah, I wouldn't change the experience. But if I had an option to, I would just change the preference order just a tad bit.
Yeah.
So.
And something that you said that's really interesting before I move on, that you said the fact that you struggled with not just anxiety and everything like that's very normal, but like just that self-confidence and that self-belief in yourself, and that sometimes that actually might play a massive role in actually what number you put what hospital in. There might be certain hospitals where people might generally think, oh, I'm not worthy enough to go there, I'll never get a job there. But it's about sometimes kind of looking at the program, looking what the hospital offers, but also knowing what you offer as an individual as well, because that's equally as important. Let's go next. Yeah, same, pretty much the same question in regards to how did you find the application process once you were applying? I know that's it's probably going to be a lot more fresher for you.
Yeah.
But how did you find that process generally, and
So the application process last year, I had a lot going on in my life. So in my fourth year, I was pregnant and I had a baby right in May. So by the time the applications were happening, I just had a fresh baby at home. So most of the time I was in STL labs I guess I was struggling with the idea of it as well. I was not as confident. So I was like, wait, I can't remember a lot of things. Like, what do I know? So that allowed me to go to STLs. I made the effort to go there every day, revise. I did so much work. I would write everything down. I had them on my walls, in the bathroom, in the toilet. It was crazy. Some of my family members thought I was going crazy. But I guess with the application process, it wasn't as bad. I felt like if you're going to be you had so much support if you access it. So when you go through network with your friends, with STLs, the teachers, there's so much support out there if you do access it, and it's not really about you. It's about you. It's about what you really want and where do you want to see yourself next year. So basically, that's for me. I really wanted to work at Western Health because it was just it just felt like a home for me. I had a baby there. I didn't have a lot of placement at Western Health. I had my last placement there. I had probably maybe one placement. I had a lot of my placement at it was all different places, but it was Mercy and it was all over the place, Monash Health. So coming into preferences, Western Health was my first preference, and Mercy, Backsmash, and the women. So I guess for me, I think with a lot of the work I did, I was lucky enough to learn interview for 4 of the hospitals, except I guess Western Health didn't do follow-up interviews, but Mercy, Werribee, the women, and Backsmash both had second interviews. So I guess the work you do now, even though there's so many assignments going on, a lot of things going on, work, lifestyle, just focus on the 2 months. It's basically where you want to see yourself. Why did you study in the last 3 years? What do you want to achieve? That's how I looked at it.
I love that. That's literally it. So I call it volunteering. You did all these placements, all this hard work, all these assignments. I know there's been tears, I know there's been all-nighters, but it's grind it out. If you haven't started that resume cover letter, grind it out and do it. You've got a few days anyways, right?
Yeah.
So it's a sacrifice, and it's interesting that, and I love how you spoke about life happens to us. We just can't control it sometimes, but it's about prioritizing and finding out what really works for us. In regards to how you're just about to start, and I loved how you spoke about values and what aligned with you and how you felt like Western Health was home. I think that's so important because sometimes you're the way you go in is not necessarily. You want to make sure that you're comfortable, you feel safe, feel like this is your place. And even if you start your grad, you're like, oh, this is definitely not my place anymore. You can always change, but it's always about going into that. In regards to, would you do it differently? What would you do differently if you were to go back to it?
I guess I think what I would do differently is, for me, I really wanted, a really challenging hospital.
Yeah.
So I wanted, even though Western Health is a really big tertiary hospital, if I were to do it again, I would probably put the women first. But I think the reason why I didn't put the women is because of their location and also life circumstances. I've got kids I've got a 4-year-old who's about to start kinder next year, and if I'm at Royal Melbourne or the women, it would take me such a long time to get there. So the distance was just, I guess, it's one of the things. But if I were to change it, if I didn't have kids, I would probably put the Royal Women if I could travel or move there. But
Love that. That's it. Your turn, Cathy. How did you find the process, and if you could do something different, what would it be?
So actually, I got a lot of advice and tips from my other friends who already finished, like Ummi and our other friends. So I'm so glad I had their help during the process, because I was all over the place. Like, I didn't know where to start, where to come, like what happens if I got a match, and I did get a match, and stuff like that. So like I started researching which hospitals and programs I wanted to go to first. So like I got an idea of what it'd be like to work there and everything. And so I really wanted to work in peds. So I was looking at the children's, and then I was looking at the women's as well. So it was like an area I was still interested in, like women's health and like kids. So I did a lot of research, and then came placements, and I was like, okay, so I'll draft down all these cover letters and do all my research before placement comes, so I won't stress out. And I did all that, and then when it came to placement, I had that all done, and then my preference changed because I think I was watching all the hospital, how they have those info sessions, and they talk about their program and what they offer and stuff, and so my preference changed. And so even though I drafted all these cover letters, it didn't really it mattered still, but I still had to go back and redo it again. But then I was also in placement, so juggling placement and then doing these cover letters and practicing interviews. It was so stressful, honestly, but it was only those 2 months that I had to get down and just write it out and just use your friends. They're such lifesavers. Get them to read your cover letters, practice interviews, ask them any questions you have about their graduate and stuff like that. It was just honestly a lot of help. Yeah.
I think that was so well said. I really quickly want to go back to the process of, there's a choice. There's the you either get matched or you don't get matched.
Yeah.
And often I feel like it's one of the things that people don't really speak about is you said you were unmatched.
Yeah.
And just tell us about your mindset of how you dealt with that and what you did differently, because you looked like you were prepared. You had resumes, you had cover letters and everything ready for into placement. Sometimes I remember I was getting my uniform ready before placement. That was it. There was no cover letter going there. You know what I mean? So you were pretty prepared and you were pretty eager and everything like that. But from a place of once you got that, you were unmatched. Tell us what happened and what you did after that, because you are going to be starting your grad year. So that'd be really nice for you to share with the ladies.
Yeah. So when I got the unmatched, the offer, I actually just finished my placement, and it was that same day. I didn't want to open it because everyone was also opening their email and finding out what did I get and everything. So I didn't want to do it in front of them in case I did get a match, and you know how it's such a sensitive topic. No one wants to find out in front of everyone, because it'd be embarrassing if you didn't get an offer. So I went home, I opened it, and I was I was so sad because I did all this, I prepared all this, and then I got a match. But then I got over it, I cried, I talked to my parents, and was I don't know what to do, it's at the end of the world, what is all this? And so I got over that, and then the next day they sent out the unmatched positions. So it will be a list of hospitals where they still had offers where you can still apply directly to them. And I just went on it. I had a look at where I wanted to go. I just applied, like even rural. I went to Bendigo, Ballarat. I just emailed them, sent out my resumes. Like even the places I didn't get offered at, I still emailed them again and asked them all. Like I got unmatched. Do you still have any availabilities there? And yeah, so like I still ask them like, and you still like, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. You don't have to have a grad program. Like you can do clinic work, you can do cosmetics, you can do anything. Like you don't really have to
Yes,
have.
it's definitely.
Yeah.
I love that, and I think it's great that you mentioned that there's a list of unmatched that actually come around, which is also really good to know.
Yeah.
But it's also about like you realize, okay, I got unmatched, but you went hard and you went hard and you went. And I think it's sometimes we have to remember that you guys are adults, you know. Yes, you went to school, went to university, but no one's spoon feeding you. This is your life. This is your career. You know what I mean? So you'll get those unmatched. If you get matched, God bless. If you don't, get unmatched, then it's time for you to go hard and go home. Do you know what I mean? You work 3 to 4 years for this degree. You got money to pay. You know what I mean? And you got things to do. And you guys are doing such a great. We need you out in that field. So it's just about like you said. I love how you had that day or two to be
just
upset
cry it
at
out.
it, cry it out, and then get back on it. Because unfortunately, some things that I heard, it's not factual, but what I've heard is a lot of people get unmatched and they just like, that's it. Nursing is not for me. Midwifery is not for me. But that's a computer that did the damage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not you.
System.
Yeah, it's just a system. Absolutely.
Just sorry, expanding on that. I do remember last year. I guess we were like a group of friends here. I think there was almost Fatima knows like because I went to school with Fatima. I think there was maybe almost like maybe 20 or 14 of us, and I think almost only about 7 of us got mic positions, and the rest were unmiked. And I think what we did was like utilize your friends. We were contacting like, how did you go? How are you feeling? Like the list of the hospitals were out. Like send me your resume. I will read it, and then we'll send it out. Like we do know that this hospital is still doing this. Like we were going around, and I think some of my other friends got job. I think it was only one person that was left out of all of us. Out of I think maybe 6 or 7 of them were unmatched, and about 6 of them got positions after the unmatched position, except only one person. And I do know that now that they did get a job as well at the hospital that they went after all this. So
I love that. That's beautiful. It's about that teamwork. You know what I mean? And just coming together through that.
yeah.
We can go to, so I think a couple of the questions you guys have really answered, like, just figuring out like what hospital you wanted to work at and things like that. Just for Ummi, like what is something that you learned in your first year of practice? You have to remember that you guys are adults, Yes, you went to, school, went to university, but no one's spoon feeding you. This is your life, this is your career. You know what I mean? So you'll get those unmatched. If you get matched, God bless. If you don't, get unmatched, then it's time for you to go hard and go home. Do you know what I mean? You work 3 to 4 years for this degree. You got money to pay. You know what I mean? And you got things to do. And you guys are doing such a great. We need you out in that field. So it's just about like you said. I love how you had that day or two to be upset at it, cry it out, and then get back on it. Because unfortunately, some things that I heard, it's not factual. But what I've heard is a lot of people get unmatched and they just like, that's it. Nursing is not for me. Midwifery is not for me. But that's a computer that did the damage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not you.
System.
Yeah, it's just a system. Absolutely.
Just sorry, expanding on that. I do remember last year. I guess we were like a group of friends here. I think there was almost Fatima knows like because I went to school with Fatima. I think there was maybe almost like maybe 20 or 14 of us, and I think almost only about 7 of us got mic positions, and the rest were unmiked. And I think what we did was like utilize your friends. We were contacting like, how did you go? How are you feeling? Like the list of the hospitals were out. Like send me your resume. I will read it, and then we'll send it out. Like we do know that this hospital is still doing this. Like we were going around, and I think some of my other friends got job. I think it was only one person that was left out of all of us. Out of I think maybe 6 or 7 of them were unmatched, and about 6 of them got positions after the unranked position, except only one person. And I do know that now that they did get a job as well at the hospital that they wanted after all this. So
I love that. That's beautiful. It's about that teamwork, you know what I mean? And just coming together through that. We can go to, so I think a couple of the questions you guys have really answered, like, you know, just figuring out like what hospital you wanted to work at and things like that. Just for Ummi, like what is something that you learned in your first year of practice?
You're not perfect. And I remember at the Mercy, obviously you have your main grad group that you've done your graduate program with, and you know you're all on the same level in terms of skill. And then you come on a shift and you look at all these amazing people who've been doing this for like years and years and years, and naturally you just compare yourself because you're like, you know, she got her VE like on the first go, and I thought the amount of times I thought someone was fully they're only 1 centimeter. You know, it's like it happens, but it's like you know, no one expects you to be perfect and know everything. You know, when you come on a shift, normally there's like the allocation sheet. Everyone knows that you're a grad midwife. Everyone has already, I guess, there's no pressure. You know, you can make errors. You can ask those dumb questions rather, and there's no judgment. You know, if I ask questions now, they'd be like, "How's this girl still working?" But you know, then I asked those questions and it was completely fine. And I think just understanding that, just take it day by day. I think for about 6 months, I always had like mini anxiety attacks driving to work. I was like, shit, what am I going to do today? You know, what's this? So nothing ever was the same every single day. And then after 6 months, it was okay. Like I would come to work and I wasn't anxious. I didn't feel sick driving to work. And then after my graduate year, I was like, I'm coming. I'm not stressed. I'm coming to do my job. I'm going. I'm not thinking about the good nights. I don't care. I've gone home now. And it just takes time. Like bit by bit, you just realize when to let it go. But at the start, I think it's very normal to have that. And all my grad friends, and I'm sure like you guys will probably experience the same thing. The first 6 months, everyone says to you, just that's probably like the shittest time you've experienced, but it will get better.
It reminds me of when I was in my grad year, like I had this mentality of like independence, but independence does not work when things are going sideways. Like they say, okay, teamwork, but you need to work in a team because you can't, you know, when things, you know, go sideways, you need help. You know what I mean? And just being able to ask help, like when you need help, ask for that help as well. So I want to get to, you know, you guys can think about the questions that you guys have, but I just have like, what is like one piece of advice you would give, either to the version of you before the application and throughout the process of the interview, or like just something that you wish someone told you?
It'll be okay. Like I wish someone was like, it'll be fine. It doesn't matter what happens. You know, you'll always find work. It's not the amount of stress I put myself through. It was now and probably wasn't that much necessary.
Yeah.
And looking back, I didn't know why someone would pick me, and I'm like, now I know why they would pick me because I'm like, I'm good. But at the time, you know, I was like, I didn't utilize the things that naturally come to me. Like I'm a black woman, I can speak. I'm Somali. I chose to work in a place which was in Heidelberg, which had a lot of Somali women. You know, there's all these intricate things that are already inbuilt in what I am that I can offer that maybe someone else can't, and that makes me unique, and that makes me worthwhile to be in that hospital. So I wish someone told me that, hey, milk the black card, milk the Muslim card, milk it to the death house, do what you gotta do, and like it'll be fine. So yeah, I think it'll be okay. If you don't get something, you will get something. That's me.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. I mean, it's basically believing in yourself, like not doubting yourself so much. Like I think the amount of self-doubt that I had, it was still so not unnecessary. Like you have so much to offer. You speak multiple languages. Like there's women who come to the hospitals who don't speak English at all, I guess, and you offer that. And also, I guess you had so much experience. I mean, coming from where you come from, I guess for me, it goes back to, I started without like I didn't speak English when I first started, and I can speak English now. Like I learned that, and I have studied so hard, like maybe from high school to uni, and you're finishing like right now, like officer, you've done so much already. Like, this is just, I guess, another stepping stone to where you want to be in the future. And I guess you have your future in your hands.
So for me, I think maybe just be confident, be yourself, don't be anyone else. Like you've worked so hard, you've gotten so far, you've come all this way. Just when you go to those interviews, when you step into this new workplace, just be you. Like they'll know that you're not that person. Like just step out there, and I think just be confident with yourself.
I love that. You guys definitely, you guys just literally like said, let's just echo each other. And I think it's so important. I think it's so important, like you guys are so worthy of the best, you know what I mean? And you guys can do it, you know what I mean? And I love how you guys said it, because you have to have that confidence. You have to think about it from a perspective of, you're gonna be in a workforce one day and you're gonna advocate for someone who comes from a diverse background. You're gonna advocate like, oh, hold on. I think, I've been in situations where I'm like, well, we're not going anywhere today. I think we need an interpreter because this person can't interpret. Like we need, So it's one of those things where even with you guys and like you guys are gonna realize that there's gonna be a point in time in that career that you're like, okay, yes, I don't have people that look like me, but I'm here for a reason. I'm here to represent my patients and provide the best quality care, right? And you're worthy of it. And I love how you guys said in confidence in your body. And I think given some practice, some affirmations of things like I'm the greatest every day in the mirror. Like standing up straight and just being like, I'm great. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? And I love how you guys said that. I honestly was up myself when I was going to my grad. I was like, they need me more than I need them. Like, you guys just don't have the degree. You guys have so much more. You have cultural understanding. You have you have everything. People are actually being trained to know how to deal with, culture. When you naturally know, you have a story to tell. You have so much to give. And I think once you understand that and accept that, you'll be unstoppable. Now it's time for you. Do you guys have any questions? Any questions? Think about it. If there's any questions, think about it. It's safe space, guys.